The stages of fetal development. Advances in technology now enable us to look directly into the womb. We can see what human life looks like in its earliest hours, days, and months. The time of possible conception by the female is limited to 1 day a month. Woman has 2 ovaries and 2 fallopian tubes. Each fallopian tube connects one of the ovaries to the uterus. The ovaries alternate in producing an egg. Each ovary produces 1 egg every other month. Each month, an egg or ovum enters one of the fallopian tubes. It has between 10 and 24 hours for fertilization to occur. If it is not fertilized in that time, it will disintegrate and be shed with the lining of the uterus in the next menstruation. The ovum is about 90,000 times larger than a sperm cell. About 250 million sperms start the race from the vagina to the uterus. They swim upstream almost in formation towards the waiting egg at a rate of about 3 inches an hour. It will thus take 2 hours to swim between 6 and 7 inches, the distance from the vagina to the egg. Of the hundreds of millions of entrants in this race, only about 100 reach the ovum. After reaching the ovum, the remaining sperms strive to penetrate the egg. As soon as one is proclaimed the winner, a change in the chemical composition of the outer wall of the ovum causes it to shut tight, preventing any other contestants from entering. The first week of life. The sperm cell that has entered the ovum combines its nucleus with that of the ovum to become a single cell. The uniting of the 2 nuclei is the moment of conception. The resulting single nucleus contains 46 chromosomes, 23 chromosomes from each parent. These chromosomes contain the genes that are the complete biological blueprint for a new individual. About 12 hours after the union of the nuclei, the new cell begins to divide and multiply. In about another 12 hours, the 2 cells will divide again and then again. They have begun a sequence that will culminate in a fetus that contains millions upon millions of cells. As it continues to divide, the ovum starts the 4-day journey down the fallopian tube towards the uterus. The 3-day-old cell cluster is called a morula, which is Latin for mulberry. By the 4th day, the cells will have increased to more than 100 and formed into a hollow ball called a blastocyst. The word blastocyst comes from the Greek blastos, meaning sprout, and cyst, meaning pouch. A sprout pouch. The blastocyst implants itself in the wall of the uterus about 7 to 9 days after conception. The mother's body doesn't even know that this new life exists. The embryo has to tell the mother that it exists by producing a hormone. This hormone tells the ovaries to make another hormone, progesterone. The progesterone warns the pituitary gland that the mother is now pregnant and should stop the shedding of the uterine lining in menstruation. A tiny embryo that is much smaller than an apple seed is now directing the mother's body. Since the embryo is genetically different from the mother's immune system marshals to destroy it. But the embryo releases other chemicals which act to turn off the mother's immune system within the uterus. In the 2nd week of life, the cells are beginning to differentiate to perform specialized tasks. One group of cells becomes the amnion, a protective sac that will keep the embryo in a fluid environment. Another becomes the yolk sac, which will produce the blood cells needed by the developing embryo. A portion of the yolk sac will form the gut. A 3rd group of cells will form the placenta. the placenta brings the baby's blood into contact with the mother's bloodstream so that it can receive oxygen and food and dispose of waste products. The umbilical cord, made up of 2 arteries and 1 vein, connects the embryo to the placenta. The mother may now sense that she is pregnant and experience some morning sickness. The 3rd week of life marks the beginning of the formation of the nervous system. The embryo is now growing so rapidly that it doubles in size almost daily. It also changes shape dramatically from round to elongated. There is a deep groove along the length of the embryo. The groove folds into a tube that will house the spinal cord, and then the top of the tube enlarges to become the brain. The nervous system is the first of the body systems to develop. It will influence the growth of all the other organs in the future development of the fetus. By the 18th day after fertilization, a tiny primitive heart has formed. Between the 18th and the 25th day, the heart will begin to beat, later increasing in frequency to up to 100,000 times each day. At the time the heart begins beating, the mother is not even sure she is pregnant. The baby's heart beats much faster than its mother's. It beats approximately 140 times per minute. The average adult heartbeat is 70 times per minute. In the 1980s, ultrasound enabled us to see live footage of an embryo as early as the 4th week. At the same time as the heart and the nervous system are forming, cells deep within the embryo are also differentiating into muscles, blood vessels, bones, and organs. A simple liver is forming, along with the start of the intestinal tract and kidneys. In the 4th week of life, the embryo is 1/5 of an inch long, yet that is 10,000 times larger than the fertilized egg. By 5 weeks, it will reach 1/3 of an inch. During the 4th week, the mouth and body cavity develop. Early eyes begin to form along with the other sense organs, the nose and ears. Tiny limb buds sprout. The head and neck make up half of the total size of the embryo. A small tail reaches its maximum length. It will disappear in the following week. In the 5th week, we see an embryo at 5 weeks on this slide. During the 5th week, the head straightens up, the eye sockets darken as pigment is produced around the 35th day. The differentiation of the brain has advanced to the extent that the cerebral cortex is clearly visible. At approximately 40 days, brain waves can be detected and recorded. The fetus can move, although the mother cannot feel the movement. This is a slide of a 6-week fetus. During the 6th week of life, the arms and legs continue to take shape. The hands become web-like. A lens, a cornea, and iris develop in each eye. The heart shows through the chest and is red in color. The liver is beginning to take over the function of producing blood cells from the yolk sac. The brain is easily visible since the bones have not yet formed in the skull. Facial features begin to develop. In the 7th week of life, the embryo is recognizably human. Eyes, ears, nose, lips, and tongue are formed. At this time, more than 100,000 new nerve cells are created every minute. The embryo is completing the formation of all 40 muscle sets, which will enable it to move spontaneously. In the completed skeleton, bone begins to replace cartilage. The jaw forms. Buds of milk teeth are nested in the gums. At 8 weeks, the embryo has grown to 1 inch or more in length. He now looks like a tiny person. He weighs about 1/30th of an ounce. All the internal organs are formed. The future developments until birth will be those of size and perfection of detail. At 2 months of life, your baby has all that he will have for the rest of his life. Think how important your diet is, your spiritual life, your attitude, the harmony of your being. All of this has affected the foundations of your baby. His matrix, his design is sealed at 8 weeks. Now the embryo is called a fetus, which is Latin for young one or offspring. At 2 months, the fetus can move his arms and legs and swim in his watery world. Some little ones have been recorded turning complete flips in less than 2 seconds. There are 1.6 million abortions performed annually in America. 51% of them are performed before the 8th week. That's 816,000 abortions before the 8th week. Now we see the 3rd month of life, 9 to 12 weeks. This is a slide of a 12-week fetus. During the 3rd month of life, the fetus will grow to a length of 2 to 3 inches and a weight of about an ounce. The womb has now doubled in size, and the tiny child uses it for vigorous activity. Dr. Roberts-Rue, an experimental embryologist, writes, "Now when the brain signals, the muscles respond, and the fetus begins to kick, turn its feet, and curl its toes. Its delicate arm bends at the wrist and elbow, and its tiny hand forms a fist. The massive head atop the puny body pivots slightly on its stumpy neck. The face with its sealed shut eyes squints, frowns, purses its lips, and opens its mouth. The fetus has begun to breathe the amniotic fluid in order to exercise its respiratory system. He also drinks the amniotic fluid and begins to urinate. His eyelids have now fused together to protect the eyes. They will open again at the 7th month. The fetus alternately sleeps and wakes. His whole body is sensitive to touch. He has 10 fingers and toes, and his own unique set of fingerprints. This slide shows the feet and toes of a 10-week-old fetus. If his palm is touched, he will make a tight fist. He exhibits reflex responses to outside stimuli. And so, the wonder of life begetting life is before our very eyes. Today, there is considerable debate in the scientific community as to when the fetus begins to feel pain. Pro-life literature states that the fetus feels pain by the 8th week of gestation. Sensory receptors develop on the skin beginning at the 7th week. But the neural connections between the pain receptors and the neocortex in the brain are not established until 20 to 24 weeks or 5 to 6 months. Dr. Watson Bowes, professor of maternal and fetal medicine at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, says, "It's hard to either prove or disprove whether a fetus can feel pain at 8 weeks. But there may be a lot that science doesn't know," Bowes says. "A fetus at 12 weeks does a lot of things. It looks like they play in utero. As you watch a fetus in utero with ultrasound, you get an impression that it's a much more sophisticated and highly complicated individual than we used to think. We used to think there was a blob lying there." We have now reached the end of the first 3 months of the baby's life. The baby can touch its thumb to its forefinger, a characteristic that separates primates from all other animals. It has taste buds and will alter the rate of its swallowing if the amniotic fluid is sweetened. As Dr. Rue writes, by the end of the first trimester, the fetus has developed all of its major systems and is virtually a functioning organism. Almost, but not quite, for it is still unable to survive independently of the mother's womb. During the next trimester, no new organs begin to form. Rather, the ones that have already been laid down become more and more like what they will be in the newborn infant. 40% of the babies aborted annually in America are aborted between 9 and 12 weeks. That's 640,000 babies. Now we look at the 4th month. A 16-week fetus is shown on the slide. The 4th month is a time of rapid growth. The fetus will reach 8 to 10 inches, 1/2 the height he will have at birth. By the end of the month, he will weigh 1/2 pound or more. Enormous amounts of nourishment are being delivered by the placenta and the umbilical cord. The umbilical cord is transporting 300 quarts of fluid a day. The ears begin to function at this time, and the vocal cords are fully developed. When we see the wonder and the intricacy of life at this age, 16 and 17 weeks, we have to remember that 5% of abortions, or 80,000 children per year, are aborted between the 13th and the 15th weeks. Now you see just how much personhood, how much integration the soul has with that child. That child is making free will movements, decisions to move, to suck his thumb, and the characteristics of his personality are clearly present. During the 5th month, the mother definitely feels her baby moving about. She may even be able to identify an elbow, a foot, or the head poking against the abdominal wall. Loud noises may cause the baby to jump or kick energetically. The baby goes through periods of sleep and wakefulness. The mother can even wake him up by tapping on her abdomen. Fingernails and toenails form in the 5th month. The baby's entire body is covered with a white ointment called vernix, Latin for varnish, which protects his skin from the fetal waters. 48,000 abortions are performed each year in the United States on babies between 16 and 20 weeks of age, right up through the 5th month. By the end of the 6th month, the baby will be between 12 and 14 inches long. He will weigh about 1.25 pounds. During the 6th month, brain waves similar to the type seen after birth can be recorded. These brain waves are thought to originate from the thinking part of the brain. What or who is thinking through that body? I will tell you. It is a living soul that is in that body, or that is coming and going in that body, but is fully integrating with it and meshing with that body and reorienting herself to a new life in that temple of God. Dr. Thomas Verney believes that sometime in the 5th or 6th month, there is a major change in the fetus. He is no longer a sensory being, one who reacts to stimuli. He is a sensate being, one who is capable of thinking. If the baby were to be born in the 6th month, he could survive if he had excellent care. As I mentioned to you, as I remembered this past life and being in the womb, I was definitely not only thinking, but listening, assessing, making judgments, forming opinions, understanding how to love or how to withhold love. This is not an action of a newly forming body. This is an action of a mature soul with continuity of being and consciousness, whose thoughts are registering and which modern science has been able to record, recording the brain waves of your thoughts in the womb and your baby's thoughts. About 100 babies per year are aborted in the United States after 6 months. During the last 3 months of pregnancy, the baby grows to 20 inches. He weighs 7 pounds or more. The baby is running out of space, and by the end of the 8th month, he can barely turn from side to side. He definitely has to give up somersaults. He gains a layer of fat that will serve as nutrition. It will also insulate him when he reaches the cooler outside world. He is building up antibodies against diseases he might meet after birth. About 10 to 14 days before birth, the baby's head will drop head down into the mother's pelvic basin. It is the baby who determines the onset of labor. Ever since Roe versus Wade, I have not been able to understand how a mother could consider that what is in her womb is not a baby, but as the pro-choice people will tell her, it's just the products of conception, honey. It's not a baby. I don't understand how a baby comes out of a non-baby. I mean, if it's not a baby when it's conceived, what is it? If you've watched flowers grow, or puppies being born, or sheep, or baby calves, it's the same principle. Life begets life. The term eclipse of reason is certainly a fitting description of the mentality of our age. We have learned well in politics, and we learn it now in life itself, that people believe what they want to believe, and they allow themselves to be deceived because they want to be deceived, not facing the responsibility for life in its agony and in its ecstasy. There is no bliss without pain, and pain is also the other side of bliss. It is unfortunate that if a woman goes to a pro-choice clinic, she will not be shown such films. She will not be shown the ultrasound viewing of her baby so that she can see that it is a baby. And they will even keep from her the awareness of what has been aborted. They will not allow the mother to see the little arms and legs and head and torso that have been torn apart in an abortion. So this is fetal development. It is God's life from the beginning to the ending. It is God's creation. It is God's wonder, which he desires to share with us. He has chosen to share with us the greatest joy of all living, the creative process.